Hello friends, welcome to another session of video tutorial on Java. Please subscribe to my channel. To subscribe to my channel, click on the subscribe button and then click on the bell icon so that whenever I post a new video, you get the latest updates. In today's session, we are going to take a look at constructor, what is a default constructor and a parameterized constructor. Let us take a look at what is constructor first. A constructor is a special type of method which gets called whenever we create an object. Okay, it is nothing but a block of code which is similar to a method. There are some rules associated with constructors. Those are constructor has the same name as the class name. Okay, the method name will be same as the class name. The second one is constructor doesn't return anything, that is it doesn't have any return value, and constructor gets called whenever we create an object. Let us see an example of this. Let us flip over to Eclipse. Let me close all of these. I'm going to make use of the earlier project which I have created, which is class object example. Inside that I'm going to create another package. Okay, so inside this new package I'm going to create a new class. Provide the name of the class here. And click on finish. Okay, so this is a class. After creating the class, we will create a constructor. Okay, constructor is a method. Okay, and constructor doesn't have any return type. Okay, so this is similar to a method wherein we provided access modifier and the name of the method is same as your class and it doesn't return anything. So we followed all the rules here. So I'm just going to print something here. The next thing is how do we invoke this constructor? So this constructor gets invoked whenever we create an object. Right? Okay, so let me right click on this and create another class. And I'm going to call it as a main class. Enable main. Click on finish. So here I'm going to create an object of class constructor example. How do we create? First class name constructor example new. Okay, so here we have created an object of constructor example. So we are not performing any operation. We have just created one object here. Let me save this and run this. Right click, run as Java application. As you can see, I have not called that method. By just creating an object of this class, it went and called this constructor and printed this message. As you can see, the same message gets printed here. Now the question is, in the earlier session we also created an object, but we didn't provide any constructor there. So if you don't provide any constructor in the class, by default the compiler will create a constructor which is called a default constructor. Okay, so whenever we create an object, the default constructor gets called. So the default constructor is the constructor wherein it doesn't have any parameters. Okay, so in this case we have created a constructor here. Let me comment this out. Okay, and save this. So if I run this main class again, okay, so it's still executed, but I don't get anything printed here because we have not provided the constructor here. By default the compiler will provide a constructor which doesn't have any message in it. Okay, so let us see what is default and parameterized constructor. So whatever the constructor which we have created just now, this is called a default constructor. That is because, so this is a default constructor. That is because we are not passing any parameters into this particular constructor. So that means within this bracket there are no parameters passed. No parameters passed. Okay, generally the constructors are used to initialize the values. Okay, for example, I'm going to have a variable here, float pi. Okay, so this is an instance variable which I created. So if I want to initialize this pi with 3.142, I can do it with the constructor. During the object creation, I can also initialize the value here. So instead of system.out.println, what I can do is I can initialize the value of pi. So pi is equal to 3.142. Okay, generally the constructors are used to initialize the value. So here this constructor, with this constructor I am initializing the value of pi to 3.142. Okay, if I want to initialize pi with a different value, how do I do it? So I can create another constructor and pass in the value Okay, I can create another constructor. So public, again the name of the, and inside this I can pass in the value. And then pi is assigned with this value, whatever we pass in. Okay, so now this becomes parameterized constructor. So this becomes parameterized constructor. So now we have a default constructor wherein there are no parameters and we pass in one parameter which we use to initialize the value of pi. Okay, so whenever we pass in any parameters to a constructor, then that constructor will become parameterized constructor. Okay, so now let us see how to invoke this parameterized constructor. Okay, let us go to main class. Okay, so we know how to invoke the default constructor now. So I will create another object of that class. Constructor example c exp param is equal to new constructor example. As you can see, there are two constructors available. One is default constructor, the other one is taking one parameter. So I'm going to use this, the second one, which takes a value. So here I'm going to pass in 6.545f, which is a float value. Okay, let us save this and run this. Run as Java application. So it didn't print anything here because we haven't put any system.out.println here. So let us see what values this object stores. Okay. So for that, sysout cexp dot okay, so this is a default constructor value. And the same thing, I'm going to print it for the parameterized constructor values. So this will be this object. Okay, so let us see. Let us run this and see. Right click, run as Java application. So the default constructor value is 3.142 and the parameterized constructor value is 6.545. While creating an instance of a class, if you want to initialize any value to a particular variable, then we can make use of either default constructor or parameterized constructor. In this example, I'm just passing one parameter. If you want to pass in multiple parameters, then you need to change the constructor and the parameters should be separated by a comma. In this example, I have taken only one parameter. If you want to pass in multiple parameters, you can do so by separating those parameters by a comma. For example, int value 1. So this is a second parameter now. So int value 1 will become a second parameter. And while calling the constructor also, we need to pass in a similar value. In my case, I'm passing 5 value because the data type for the second parameter is of type integer. So let me go back. Okay. Another thing to note here is once you have a parameterized constructor, you must provide a default constructor. What I mean by that is, since I have a parameterized constructor as well as a default constructor, if I comment out the default constructor, then the main class will give you an error. Here it says the constructor example is undefined. That means the default constructor is undefined. So let me enable this back again. Once you have a parameterized constructor, you must have a default constructor. That is the end of this session.